What's going on, everybody? This is Geek Summit returning with night 3 in version 3 of a McFarlane DC Multiverse Superman with a fabric cape. This is my third draft. We've done number 2 and we've done number 1. Trying to get them on the frame here. Where we did number 1 had no wire to it. It was just a fabric cape being fitted onto the figure. That's complete with the iron-on transfer for the back with the nice S emblem on there, and of course also emblem on number 2 with the first fitted wired cape. And of course you can see the entry points of the cape up front are a little bit clunky, but it was the first draft, but still, you know, very nice as far as the cape goes. The way everything falls and folds. You can see a little bit of my work there as the seam is exposed. I used a little bit more tape than I had fabric around that edge, but still, you know, pretty good first draft for just kind of getting in there and just kind of doing things a little bit different than I'm used to doing. But here we have version 3 with a nice clean cape going, nice tight entry points up front, and I'm really digging the result. I'd honestly like to talk a little bit about the figure altogether, just things I've noticed. So I guess you call this a little bit of a formal review on top of just kind of showing off version 3 here. I think these figures are awesome. You know, I think they're definitely a increase in quality from what we saw in the Jason Fabok version that we got from DC Collectibles. That would be this guy right here, standing right next to him, which I'd also done a cape on probably, this got to be 6 months ago, if not getting closer to a year. You know, I was doing some things a little bit differently, actually zipping into the body with the Dremel for a little bit, and then connecting those entry points actually into the body. But that's not really something I had the ability to do with the McFarlane figures, because there's so much workings to the shoulder articulation actually inside the body. But I think for an end result of draft 2 of this type of cape, I think we did a pretty tight job. As you can see, the entry points are nice and tight up front, and we get a nice presentation on the back as well. Can only really back up so much, and it's still just about an ankle length cape as we had on the first one. You know, so I will say the neck articulation is a little short of what I would expect, you know, knowing that there were so many expectations from, you know, Mattel and even DC Collectibles, and really anytime you're talking about a flying character, having a really generous neck joint right there is kind of a big deal when it comes to flying characters. Also, the arch in the back, you're getting a little bit of cooperation from this ball joint in the waist, as well as this mid-abdomen guy here, and it's pretty tight in the actual working of the joint, and also just in presentation. I mean, you get a pretty good flying presentation from that. Of course, I've altered the neck just a little bit, a hair, if you will. I've trimmed the hairline in the very back to allow for a little bit more dipping and looking up. So I mean, you know, I've had to make alterations to make this figure the figure that I want it to be. Still, all that being said, I think it's still a pretty great figure. The double joints in the elbows don't really bother me so much. The lack of a double joint, rather. The hip joints, you know, so there's only so much, you know, movement you get upward and then backward also. And, you know, there is a slight turn to the hips, kind of in lieu of a swivel or a thigh cut, I guess. But still, I mean, for Superman, what Superman is a flying character. And for my Superman figure to be able to go into a super awesome flying pose, that's really about all I could ask for. These are things that have been, you know, kind of left short on even the NECA release of the Christopher Reeve Superman, and definitely the Mattel releases had continuous uphill battles as far as, like, you know, the original DC superheroes had a really wide stance, and then they kind of corrected that going into the DC universe. But still, you had, you know, limitations in the head tilt sometimes, and of course always the big heavy capes. And then even when they corrected that for the Super Friends version, it was still a little bit too much of an homage and a little bit too late as far as referring to the classic style of like a Superpowers cape. But anyway, getting back to this guy, the spread on this cape, you know, like I've said in the last couple of videos, I start with about a 14-inch half circle of fabric. So you've got quite a bit of fabric going into play there. But as you can see with the wire in the cape, kind of dictating how that behaves. I mean, you've got a super nice and tight presentation of how that cape falls, coming directly off the shoulders and hanging off the back. So it's not all over the place. Pretty tight stuff. But you know, with that wire, you're able to kind of pose it a little bit more dramatically, just bending the wire and stuff, and things stay in place pretty well off of the shoulders. I've got this glued down pretty well, and the wire runs all the way up this side and then around the neck, forming that clean neckline, and then back over off the other shoulder. So I had to use some needle nose pliers to really make this point very tight, so it really just kind of has that clean tucked in look. But that is version 3, and basically I believe that's about where I'm going to get off. I think the only revisions I would make to my process would be to take this 1/4-inch glue type hemming tape. It's a heat transfer glue tape, essentially. The only change to my process, I would think, would be to take that tape and now fold it in half, and then put the wire within that tape, and then fold the hems over, and that way everything stays very nice and tight. I've got about a 1/4-inch hem right here, if not just a little bit more, to conceal all that tape. And I think I could do a little bit better and a little bit tighter. I've got pretty good control over my materials when I'm working flat, but how they manifest on the figures is of ultimate importance. But I think we've got a pretty tight result here. And as far as the overall look of the figure, I mean, I would say this is approaching as neat and clean a look as we're expecting to get from this Mafex Hush Superman figure that's coming out, I believe sometime maybe summer 2020. I can't remember, but it's definitely something I'll be looking out for, because ultimate presentations of the Superman figure is kind of the path I've been chasing since probably 2001 with that first Superman release. I think I had like 21 points of articulation, and they weren't the greatest points of articulation, but it was still at that time the best Superman figure that had ever been made. And since then there have been kind of ups and downs, but I think this McFarlane figure is a nice effort for the new decade, and I think there's going to be plenty better coming along behind it. McFarlane rarely really disappoints, but these are comic book characters, and they're definitely a much more dynamic type of thing than maybe McFarlane's been used to producing on the regular. You know, their stuff before Fortnite's been awesome. Those characters are absolutely eclectic and bizarre, but they've done a really nice job with, you know, the articulation, paint detail, and everything else. And I think we're going to continue to see that from McFarlane for sure. But this is just a quick little video showing off version 3 of this cape. You know, I plan to make a few of these to share out there, because I'm sure somebody's gonna say, "Ooh, I gots to have it," and I definitely plan to make that a reality for a few folks. I'm not mass producing this kind of stuff. That's a bit much to expect. But what I do mass produce, I would like to share with folks out there. So keep an eye out, keep looking up, and maybe you'll see one of these flying your way. Have a good one.